Welcome to Diversity Conversations, where we engage in thought-provoking dialogue to identify leadership solutions to today's most challenging conflicts. Stream live each week, Saturday, 9:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. Hosted by Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Strategist and CEOs Eric Ellis and Tommy Lewis. Join us and add your voice to this engaging diversity conversation.
Good morning, Greater Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky, the United States, and the world. My name is Eric Ellis, and I'm the President and CEO of Integrity Development Corporation. And I'm joined this morning by my good friend and brother,
Tommy Lewis, President and CEO of Make It Plain Consulting. Good morning, Eric.
Good morning, Tommy. How are you, man?
Oh, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. It's a beautiful Saturday morning. It's great to wake up. It's great to be here, and it's great to have another diversity conversation.
Absolutely, Tommy. I'm excited about our guest today that is going to be coming to us from Germany. And we're going to have an exciting conversation about leadership. But Tommy, what were some of the critical diversity conversations that you either observed or participated in this week?
So I participated in one critical conversation. Had nothing to do with work. It had nothing to do with the community. Had everything to do with my household.
Okay.
Family, right? And so we just had a challenging, I wouldn't say challenging, it was literally a diversity conversations where we had multiple different and diverging thoughts of maybe the same event or the circumstance, right? So the circumstance that, we have some folks in the house. I had a different view of their being in the home still, and what's the time frame for a relaunch. They had the viewpoint of, I'm looking at the next 2 years or however it takes. The wife had a viewpoint of, everybody just relax. We are blessed to have a home to have everyone in. So we had three different vanishing points of an event. Ooh. And so if we think about the R factor, E plus R equals O, Eric. Yeah. E is the event. We can never control the event.
That's right.
The situation, the conversation. R is our response, right? That we can control. And then O is the outcome. I didn't do as good of a job as I would have liked in my response. Right. In my response, I had it well thought out.
Right. I've been there, man.
Yeah. But I was
in practice.
I got emotionally hijacked.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And so the outcome was that we had to kind of go our separate ways for a few moments. Time out. Right. Here's what I learned about this conversation, Eric, is that I've known this about myself, and it just showed itself in this event. That when I'm in events and conversations, Eric, I can literally see myself outside of myself.
Yep.
Right. And so when it happened, the conversation, escalated, I was able to go back quickly and say, I'm sorry. I was out of my mind.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Everybody get out of the house. And so, and that was unrealistic.
Right.
And so I just tapped into what I believe is my talent and my gift of leadership and humility to really think of other people, including myself, but putting them first. And so that was the diversity conversation that I had this week, which wasn't just one conversation. It was kind of a series of conversations that end up coming to that end.
Well, let me first of all commend you for diving into the deep end. Because, Tommy, I'm going to tell you that challenging conversations are easier when we don't care or the issue does not impact us directly, or if we're not in a situation that we don't want to be in, we don't believe we should be in, and it feels like we're being forced into.
Absolutely.
And so what happens then, Tommy, it's no longer theoretical. It is principled.
Yep.
It is highly emotional. And I'm going to say this because I'm your friend and co-host, and that we're right. Cut this tape. Just make sure nobody in the family sees this. But I would say that I love the clarity that you got. What you did ultimately, Tommy, was you laid out levels and you sort of gained it out to some extent. What's the end of this if it continues like this?
Absolutely.
and you went downstream and you said, okay, there's a bad ending to this if I keep going the way that I'm going. I don't see ground being given on the other side. They're emotional as well. And so now I've got a decision to make. And you chose the high road. When Michelle Obama says, when they go low, we go high, and everybody said, we reject that now. When they go low, we go lower, but you went high, and you leaned into your leadership, your value system, a degree of humility that it takes to make a decision and to take some actions that are different than what we really want to do and what we believe we have the right to do.
I do appreciate that, Eric. And I know our guest, who's a guru, subject matter expert in the space of leadership and all things human, I would say that. My own definition of leadership, Eric, to your point, is leadership is the ability to see an opportunity before it presents itself. And that opportunity can be a great opportunity, a benefit, or it can be kind of a failure to be able to see that. Surrounding yourself with the right people that will follow you to the end. In the midst of the conversation in my home, I did see a negative outcome, right? I saw a lose, because there are three parties in the conversation. I saw a lose. And I wasn't concerned personally with a win for Tommy, lose for you. I wasn't concerned for that. And so I chose a path in my mind of acquiescing, kind of backed away to ensure that at the moment, we, each of the three parties, the stakeholders, the participants, could win or save face or be heard and valued in the moment, and such that the moment does not create residual ripples of negativity in the future. I literally just saw this is not going to be good.
Right.
Eric, let me tell you, I saw this won't be good in 5 years.
Right.
And so I just stopped. So I know we have our guests.
But before we even go there, community, there's a lesson in this for you. I'm going to give a shorter story, a lighter story, but the same kind of decision making. So my oldest son came to the house. He's got his own place downtown. He comes to the house. I told this story before. And he walks in because we're supposed to watch the ball game. He walks into our bedroom, and I'm not there. And he goes into the bathroom, and there I am sitting in the bathroom watching a playoff game. And he looks at me like, Dad, oh, great, powerful leader. What are you doing in the restroom watching the game? Can't we watch it at least in the bedroom? I said, no. And what I said to him is that part of the way you get to over 30 years of marriage is that you have to choose your battles. And you have to make some choices on places where you're going to lose. And this is one of those. And so just grab a little spot there on the jacuzzi and you can turn and watch the game too. And so community, here's what we're saying to you is that part of leadership, personal leadership, Kenny Rogers would say, know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, know when to run. And so what we're saying to you is that wherever you are in your family, in your workplace, if you have the ability to make a leadership decision that on this particular issue at this particular time, I'm going to choose to sort of submit, to apologize even. I mean, that's huge because everything in your mind is saying, I'm not the one that should be up. No, it's not about that. It's about leadership. And so we're going to bring to the stage our guest from Germany, Charlotte Otter. And how are you this morning?
I'm feeling so well and delighted to be with you, Tommy and Eric.
What time is it in Germany now? It's afternoon, right?
Yeah, it's 20 to 4.
Okay.
Yes, indeed. Eric, we're global. We're global.
Yes,
Charlotte is making us global.
Absolutely.
Welcome.
Right. Charlotte, I certainly was pleased that we had a chance to meet and to have some wonderful conversation. And as we always do, we like to start by having our guests introduce themselves to our community, our audience. And we really like you not just to give a professional sort of introduction of who you are, but a personal one to talk about your growing up, years, and who are the people and the events or experiences that you would say have made you who you are today.
Oh, thank you, first of all, for the lovely invitation to join you, but also the invitation to talk personally, because I'm speaking a lot on stages and on podcasts at the moment, and it's always the professional side that I'm asked to bring. So I'm very touched by the opportunity to bring the personal side as well. Yes, I'm South African by birth. I've lived in Germany for coming up for 30 years now, and it was a professional move to Germany that my husband and I made as newlyweds. But I was so shaped and formed by my South African upbringing. And, I'm happy to say up front that I was born into apartheid South Africa. And, as a very small part of the population that was privileged by apartheid. And that's been a very difficult thing for me to find a way to talk about comfortably, because I'm fully aware that 95% of the population had a much, much tougher time than me. So when I now talk about my book and coming from South Africa, the angle that I have is all very much what shaped me and what formed the genesis of not only this book, but the two novels that I wrote, is the sense that I grew up with terrible leaders. I grew up with nationalistic, right-wing, fascist-oriented leaders. People were pulled off the street. There was detention without trial. People were tortured in prison. People had to go into exile. Nelson Mandela was jailed for 27 years for being the voice of resistance. And that was the atmosphere that I grew up in, with the sense of, surely it can be better. Surely it can be better than this. But I was also so lucky, because I was an adult when Nelson Mandela was freed. I was 21, and I watched his walk to freedom on TV with my family, and I actually feel weepy just thinking about it. And I got to vote in the first democratic election. So I saw the transformation, and from those terrible days to the good days. And I think that is what gives me hope in this world. Things feel terrible. They feel oppressive. It feels like we have terrible leaders. But I lived through change, and I lived to gain a sense of hope. And I think that's what my South African background really, really gave me, is the sense of transformation is possible. Great leaders are out there, and things can get better.
Yes.
So we're going to take a pause here, Charlotte, to say a couple of things. First of all, to let you know, this is absolutely the right place for a good cry. Because Tommy and I cried too. And, I want to say to our broader community, who many of them may be feeling discouraged in this country right now because of things that are going on. Many people believe that people that are different than them maybe just completely going along with what's happening. And they need to see you as an example of somebody who is in the midst of difficult times and days, who recognizes that that's wrong, and whose heart is longing for change. And that when that change occurs, everything in them emotionally and personally celebrates that to the point of emotion. Yeah. And so Tommy and I are so honored to have you and what you stand for and what your family has stood for around fairness, because that's an inspiration to us right now. It's not always that we have the ability to bring about great change ourselves. Sometimes we can just believe for better. Sometimes we can just try to operate better in our own space, in our own skin. And Charlotte, I would say to you that that's enough. We appreciate that.
Oh, that's such a beautiful message. And I was just sitting here reflecting on why the emotions are so real for me, because I was 21 then and I'm 56 now. But I just think it is that sense of justice does prevail.
Yes. Yeah, ultimately, it does. Our human condition around the world is fairly the same. There are events and experiences that impact people differently. And the core, or the common denominator, or the foundation, is that when and where there is hope, there is opportunity. And there's sometimes in some minds, hope unborn may have died. But then you have folks like you, us, our community, who remind us that even that twinkling of hope could have us making seismic decisions to change not only our lives, the next generation's lives, but in the next millennium. Some of the things that we go through are not only for us, it's for other people to really see as an example of what love, hope, leadership, true leadership can actually do. But I don't think that we really know what love is until we've bumped up and experienced some form of unlove or even hate. We don't know what true leadership is until we've bumped up against, this is not leadership, this is bad leadership. Mm-hmm. So I want to turn it back over to you, Charlotte, and have you continue to unpack, who you are, what you do, and how you have come to us today.
Yeah, so fresh out of university in South Africa, I worked as a journalist. And as many journalists do, I shifted quite quickly into communications and PR. And I was a newlywed. My husband was working for a tech company in Johannesburg. The head office was here in Germany. He was offered a contract to come over for 2 years. And nearly 30 years later, we're still in Germany, and we've raised 3 bilingual children here. And Germany's been very kind to us as a family, and we've loved living in Europe and raising our children in Europe. I worked in the tech company for a while. Then I had a long career break to raise our kids, during which time I wrote my first novel, which is crime fiction set in South Africa, and became a blogger. I was one of the early kind of mummy bloggers on WordPress. I blogged about the experience of living in Germany and raising children in Germany, but I also blogged about the process of writing my book. And in 2012, I was asked to return to SAP as an executive communicator, because there was this awareness and sense that executives needed to learn skills around social media. And I had some skills. And so I was able to come on board and start working one-to-one with executives with how do you find your voice? How do you find the stories that you tell on social media? And it's a little bit like how companies now hire Gen Z to come in and help them get onto TikTok.
Right. Yeah. So can you talk about some of those experiences? Because it's one thing for that to be a job, but what did that look like, feel like, in terms of some of the people, certainly no names, but what were you experiencing in trying to coach them?
I mean, I was experiencing a lot of reluctance. I think that leaders, certainly 12, 15 years ago, there was the sense of, that's a nice to have or it's an extra, but I've really got an important job here. I've got, sales figures to meet. I've got development deadlines to achieve. I've got customers to keep happy. So it always felt a little bit like an extra. But we had a CEO at the time, Bill McDermott, who was a very charismatic human being. And he really led the way at SAP with being on social media and using LinkedIn especially to great success. And I think if you have one leader who sets the tone and sort of demonstrates by their actions that this is a great way to raise your profile and to also build awareness and brand awareness for the company, then that started to shift. So once other leaders saw Bill's facility with storytelling, his ability to be really comfortable on social media, then it started to become a bit more of a wave, and the doors definitely started to open for us as executive communicators.
Wow, that's phenomenal. Yeah. And so what would you say, can you talk about any examples of breakthroughs that leaders got as a result of some of the coaching that you were providing?
I think it's about showing humanity. So, and I think that that's an ongoing debate with communicators and leaders in large corporates, where leaders are so focused on the brand that they sometimes, or the company or the business, they sometimes forget to show up in their own humanity. Yeah. But the next CEO of SAP is a German fellow called Christian Klein, and he was going to Davos, where the great and the good, meet every year. And they fly in their private jets and their helicopters to talk about sustainability and how we're going to fix the world. And Christian said to his team, I can't fly in on a private jet. And he took an e-car to Davos, and he blogged the process of getting there, of photos of himself, plugging the car in and how long the journey took him. And, that got such great resonance, not only for the company, but for him as a human. And, I think that's the lesson that I see is the more human leaders are prepared to be, the more they're prepared to come out from the safe corporate boxes, the more followership they get, the more enthusiasm they build for the companies, the more human they become, the more humanity and followers they gain for their businesses.
Right. So as I'm listening to you, Charlotte, I would agree with you exactly what you're saying. But my question is, for those leaders who are reluctant to show their humanity, to even connect their own humanity to the humans that are running the business, that are running the divisions, et cetera. What are the reservations of those leaders who decide or who cannot show up as humans, quote unquote humans.
Yeah, there are two sides to it. The one is fear, and the other is a reluctance to look like they're doing self-promotion. And on the fear side, I think folks are terrified of making a mistake. And we see what happens. We see what happens when mistakes are made. You know, in this world of social media and how fast it is, mistakes are writ large across the whole world. So I think people are frightened of the mistakes. But a leader who I featured in my book and I also interviewed on my podcast, Speech Bubbles, she said to me, I asked her about her reputation, and she said to me, I don't think about my reputation too much because I know what my values are. And I know that if I show up authentically to my values at all times, my reputation will take care of itself. And to me, that's the biggest antidote to fear that I can think of, is if you have values and you always show up according to your values, there's no need to ever have any fear, because you will never make that reputational mistake. You will never go to a Coldplay concert
Absolutely.
with your HR director.
You would never do that.
Right.
You would not do that.
Well, we have a question that I'd like Lydia to bring up. What role does relationships play in getting your expertise used? And I'm going to add to that reputation. What role does relationships and reputation play in getting your expertise used?
Yes. So reputation is really three parts. So it's the stories that you tell, and that's when your narratives and your values, the things that you express. It's your behaviors, and if your stories and your behaviors don't match, that's what I was talking about. That's when you have a reputational risk. And the third is networks, and the networks are those relationships. So it's, what do people say about you when you're not in the room? It's, how are your networks and your communities lifting you up when you're not around? How are your sponsors and your mentors talking about you when you're not around the table at the time? So there's a part of your reputation that you can control, and there's a part of your reputation that's out of your control. And I think that goes back to the fear part, that people feel that reputation is scary because they can't control it. But if you have great relationships, if you show up for other people, if you are someone who's prepared to help, even when there aren't cameras on, then your network is going to show up for you.
Let me ask you this. I'm going to ask you to take it down a level from just advising people around this to talking about how you navigated this. So I don't know if have you had the opportunity to do coaching with a number of CEOs, and how did you get those opportunities? How did all this dynamic work to open up those opportunities for you?
Yeah, I do work with CEOs. I work with MDs. I work with founders. I work with folks in the C-suite. And I would say that every single one of my coaching opportunities come through my network. Every single one is a reference. I would love to get 5 customers a week from LinkedIn. I would love that to happen. Right. And I still hope it will. I live in hope. But right. It's always through the network. It's always one-to-one.
Right. And are you seeing, can you give people an example of, again, you don't have to call out the names, but any examples of how that worked? Was this something that you sought out? You asked people to help open doors for you? Or did they do that sort of organically as a result of just talking positively about the good work that you were doing with them?
Yeah, it was the latter, actually. So somebody I met, because we were in a think tank together. So it's a community around wanting to support brands with a conscience. And it's this particular community is also talking about leadership with a conscience. It's called the Madingi Group. And it's somebody I met in the Madingi Group. And she and I had a one-to-one chat. Then I went on her podcast. She said, wow, I love the work that you're doing. She introduced me to a connection of hers. I started to work with him. He introduced me to a connection of his. I started to work with her. He's recently written me a reference on LinkedIn. You know, I didn't ask him to. He just wrote a beautiful post about the work that we've done together. So it's 100% relationships. But it's relationships built on a reputation for doing good.
You said something very quickly,
yes.
But it did not go without notice by a certain Tommy as well. I was a part of a think tank.
Yeah.
Think tank. So how do people sort of navigate if they're not part of some high value, high influence group? How might they sort of gain access to people who may have the ability to recommend you for an opportunity?
Yeah, so I mean, LinkedIn is a very powerful community. And I always say I ignored my own reputation when I worked in corporate, and I've had to build it since, I left SAP in 2022 to start my own business. I had to start from scratch, building my own reputation on LinkedIn. And the way that I did it was not just posting and blasting out posts, but by showing up and supporting other people. And that's how you build community in networks.
Yeah, oh my goodness.
In networks where you don't necessarily have an in because you're not an alumni, you're not in a think tank, or it's not a community or voluntary organization where you live. And the LinkedIn algorithm rewards connection. So if somebody's made an effort to write a post, if I, as a commenter, arrive on their post and like it, I am helping push their post up the algorithm by saying something. And I don't just turn up and say, great post, thumbs up. I turn up and say, this is a great post and this is why I think it's great. So you start to have those conversations, and LinkedIn has just unlocked opportunity for me. So I say I've had no customers, but I've had amazing other opportunities. I've joined communications organizations through networks on LinkedIn. I've been invited to keynote at conferences through connections on LinkedIn. I've been invited on podcasts. So I think that leaders or folks who wanting to unlock opportunity really can take a good look at LinkedIn and start to use it in powerful ways that aren't just broadcast.
And let me pause a little bit to celebrate again this phenomenal lesson that you're giving almost indirectly. There are so many people today that want to be successful. And so they're focused on blasting out information. And I've at times done that. And I think what you're saying is something that is more humble, and that is see how I can be a resource to others. And I think that ties in very nicely or neatly into who you are as a person. The reason why you were in tears earlier is because in your heart is a genuine person that's not just trying to be big quickly, but that's trying to bring something of value to the world in a way that improves the lives of others. And I think it's that kind of value structure that can get you noticed and valued. So I think it's powerful.
Yeah, and I think, if anyone who's listening or if anyone who's coaching folks, that type of showing up for others in networks like LinkedIn it really is very, very powerful. And I get an enormous amount of satisfaction. So I say to my clients, spend 10 to 15 minutes a day just commenting. You're building ties, you're building a web, and eventually the web is a net and it holds you up.
Why don't you just pick up your story again back to, we want you to show your book and talk about it, talk about the things that led up to the book, and then the unique way that you believe there's a diversity angle to it as well.
Oh, thank you so much. So when I left corporate, one of the things I decided to do was to go back to university after 30 years. And the course I studied was an MSc in Change Leadership, which is jointly run by HEC Paris, a French university, and Oxford Saïd Business School. And I chose this course specifically because I realized after all my years in communications that no leader ever gets up on stage to say, hey guys, everything's staying the same. Right. Leaders always talk about change. And I had led very large change communications initiatives, and I was running them based on instinct, based on my values, what was the ethical thing to do, but without an academic understanding. So I did this course. It ran over 18 months. And then my thesis was on reputation. So the thesis was on how the CEO and the head of comms build trust to manage and mitigate reputational risk. And I did really well. And I spoke to both of my professors and asked them how I should take the thesis further. And the one said do a PhD and the other said write a business book. And I decided write a business book would be shorter.
Right.
But as I came out of that, I was thinking the world doesn't need another communications book. There are a lot of really great ones. And to make this super interesting for me, to turn this into a passion project that I'm going to spend the next years on, I needed to bring in the diversity angle. So the book sits at the intersection of reputation, leadership, and diversity. I'll show it to you. It's called We Need New Leaders, Mastering Reputation Management to Reshape the C-Suite. And as I set out to write it, I asked myself the question, what can leaders from diverse backgrounds, diverse identities, and underrepresented minorities learn from the skills of reputation management? So the toolbox that I had built over the years to land, keep, or create their dream leadership roles. And I interviewed 40 leaders, some established, some emerging, with diverse identities or diverse backgrounds or from underrepresented minorities, to find out what their experience of leadership was. So this isn't Charlotte's lessons to the world. This is 40 leaders' lessons to the world, and they come from all over. I interviewed a fashion designer in Africa. I interviewed leaders in Europe, in the US, and in South Africa, in India, because I wanted to tap into their knowledge.
That's wonderful. What if there were a number of things? I'm certain there are a number of things that you learned from these leaders and their experiences. What were some of the key takeaways about leadership that you found?
So, if somebody has a diverse background from what the leadership norm looks like in their business or country, or has a diverse identity, or is from an underrepresented minority, they have come through obstacles.
Yeah. The
doors have not swung open automatically for them. And through living through obstacles, they develop deep self-knowledge and incredible empathy for others. And with that deep self-knowledge and that empathy, as leaders, they are intentional about how they show up, intentional about how they use language, intentional about how they coach, mentor, and inspire their teams. And it's that intentionality, I think, was the most common thing that came across. This thoughtfulness about leadership. You know, at the top, Tommy, you talked about humility, incredible humility. You know, these are not people, although some of them have risen to huge heights in their companies and are running enormous organizations, still so in touch with where they come from and so humble. Yeah. And that was really amazing to see.
Let me ask you this, Charlotte. I think that's powerful. And yet, as we look at corporate America, for an example, I was just looking at some data that said that only 10 to 15% of managers are great, 16 to 30%, or 20% are good, and then 30 to 45% or sort of average. What happens between a great leader and then trying to translate that or transfer that to other upcoming leaders in the organization? Where's the breakdown? I would suggest that it has to do with a focus on widgets, tasks, and getting the work done. I also think that emotional intelligence and all the other people's skills, those are difficult. So those are difficult things. What are you seeing is the disconnect between even a great leader and that sort of being translated throughout the rest of the organization?
So I think that great leaders are very articulate about the cultures that they want.
Okay.
I do think they are. But when I say great leaders, I'm not just saying people who are really excellent at getting the widgets out. Great leaders look after culture as much as they look after the widgets. I think the challenge, and this is coming through a lot in a lot of the interviews I'm doing on my podcast now, is we have this challenge of middle management and I was one, where I was thrust into running a global team, 50 people. Yeah. We had incredibly intense deadlines to meet with no training. Mm-hmm. Now, I have values, so I tried to lead according to my values. I did my best.
Right.
But I think we're missing training those leaders and helping them become real culture translators, the way, great CEOs are talking about it. And then I'm seeing a new challenge that's coming on top of that, which is those middle managers are also the folks who are going to have to reinvent their functions using AI. So they're just being compressed by pressure. They have the deliver the widgets pressure, they have the culture pressure, now we have to reinvent our entire function.
Mm-hmm. You know what I like? You softly did this, Tommy. It's like what Tommy does sometimes is he'll give feedback softly. You actually said to me that you almost can't be defined as a great leader without navigating and creating a culture So I love that. That was a wonderful, because I said great leaders, and why doesn't it? And you almost said, no, actually you can't be a great leader if you're not driving this down. And I love that. But I find that because I've got a couple clients right now, they're exhausted by, why can't employees sort of just see us all as great? And why is it that everywhere we go, it feels like employees are belly aching around not having, wanting more accountability for their managers and leaders? And I think that you're saying to some extent that people are overwhelmed with all these things, and we have to find ways to prioritize effective people-centered leadership. What have you seen that has sort of made people sort of pivot to see that as an opportunity worth investing in, becoming better leaders?
I'm hesitating because, we're at an interesting juncture in corporates at the moment where diversity, equity, and inclusion has become a contested battleground. So if you'd asked me a year ago, I would have said, work harder on your DEI programs. But I do still say that, actually. One of the challenges, I think, with diversity, equity, and inclusion is that it became siloed. So it was much easier to just remove it. Yeah. And the challenge now is to thread it into every team, to thread it into every interaction, to thread it throughout the corporation. So there's no chance of it being sidelined or removed. So I would say the leaders who are doing that well are the leaders who are not only hiring, remunerating, promoting, rewarding according to inclusion principles, but they're also the leaders who are running inclusive team meetings. And I know, as an introvert, I only discovered during the pandemic that I was an introvert. I didn't know that about myself, but that meetings are tough on introverts.
Yes,
right. Absolutely.
And we have a culture that rewards loudness, but we're missing all the excitement and the deep thought and the depth and the quality of what's happening down in the chat, which is where the introverts sit.
Right. I have found that, thought just got away from me. But yeah, I love what you're saying about making sure that we're inclusive of introverts. Tommy, I don't know if you have a thought.
Yeah,
I'm trying to collect mine.
I have a number of thoughts, and thank you. So, selfish question here, Charlotte. I am working with a team. Their senior leader has been with the organization for almost 3 decades. The culture of the organization has evolved around this leader's personality, right? And sometimes the personality is abrasive and maybe a little bit of bullying, right? Maybe some of it is charismatic. Now that this leader, after 30 years, is starting to transition, they're looking to retire. How there's a term called managing up. Mm-hmm. How would the next level of leaders in that C-suite, right? How would they leader up to and with this existing leader who is still on the job, arms around everything, doesn't want to let anything go, but doesn't know that they are sinking the ship, right? They're holding on. This leader, the existing leader, 30 years, is holding the anchor that is sinking the ship, and everyone else is saying, I wish you would just retire so we can kind of move the organization forward. Again, my question is, how would anyone leader up, support the leader, lift them up and proverbially out without, shaming the leader, victimizing the leader, or even getting retaliated back against the leader?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough situation that they're in. So full empathy to them. I think folks like that will be prickly. And you mentioned retaliation. So, people are in danger if they make too many suggestions. So I would probably advise the team around that leader to lean into questions, avoid suggestions,
yes,
and lean into questions. And try to ask as many open-ended questions as possible, because it sounds like that's the kind of leader who's going to be resistant to suggestions or ideas. And one of the things that came up in my studies, which I'd love to share with you around certain types of leaders and powerful questions, is there's this idea of single loop and double loop leaders. So Single loop leaders are those who see a problem, throw resources, fix the problem. And double loop leaders are leaders who see the problem, make sure that they throw the resources and fix the problem, and then afterwards ask their team, what was my role in causing this problem? And what can I do in future to make sure that this doesn't happen again? And I think when I learned about that during my studies, I think that was the light bulb moment, because I could divide all the leaders I had worked with into you're the single loop leaders and you're the double loop leaders. And I do believe that the double loop leaders are the leaders we need.
Oh,
That's excellent. We'll invite the community. That was a gem there.
Absolutely.
As we revisit this episode, double click on that. Obviously, get Charlotte Otter's book, but double click on that jewel of advice. I really appreciate not only that piece, Charlotte, but the piece of asking questions, leaning into questions, open-ended questions. I appreciate that because I find myself, and I'm working with individuals, in the vein of defensiveness, we typically lean into closed-ended questions.
Yeah.
And we back the leader into a corner, or we back whoever we're having a conversation with into a corner, and it polarizes situations. It's either yes or no, right or wrong. Are you going to do it or not?
Yes.
And the leader, oftentimes, they're unsure. Sometimes they're afraid to make the mistake. So if you back me into a corner, are you going to make the decision or not? And I haven't fully thought out what the decision is, or I haven't gained enough information to inform my decision, I may lash back out at you personally versus the process, versus the decision, versus the organization. I just lash out back at you. Who are you to ask me this? So now that develops contention amongst the ranks, and leadership does not surface. I'm receiving this personally, again, per my conversation this week, right? Where I took things personally, right? And I lashed back out, right? Because I was being pushed into kind of defined yes or no type of a situation. I wasn't clear on what I was going to do. You're saying lean in, ask more questions, ask more open-ended questions. And I believe, Charlotte, this will allow both and all parties to really understand others' thinking. Yeah. So if I continue to ask you questions like, help me understand what are you saying here, right? And then that spirals into another narrative. Okay. All right, so we can just go down that path as well. This was helpful for me.
Yeah. So I did remember what I forgot, and then I'm going to ask you a question. What I had forgotten was when you said that one of the problems with DEI is it needed to be woven into the fabric of what we do. So Tommy and I have been doing this work long enough that I remember when there were these two camps. Does DEI need to be a standalone, or does it need to be integrated fully into the organization? And I came to the conclusion that it needed both. Because too often when organizations try to weave it in, it became a bumper sticker. In other words, they'd be doing their business and they'd say, remember inclusion, remember DEI. And DEI is so complex and often emotional that sometimes it needs but now that option is almost moving away. So you got to, I think the weave it in is really the strategy that we've got to find. But the other thing that you're saying in the context of we need new leaders, I would want everybody in every company that I work with to read that book. But the leaders that are getting the attention, like our president, are not leaders that are leading with empathy, that are asking the question, what was my role? And so people are, what they're observing as successful are leaders that don't have the traits and characteristics that you're talking about. How do we get from this attention-seeking society and us praising bad leaders to these new leaders? Who's clamoring for that? What's the real energy to make that happen?
Yeah, it's a really good point. And one of the things I say early on in the book is that I say we're in a crisis of leadership, which is what you've just described. You know, those kinds of examples that our children are seeing every single day. Other examples are the burnout epidemic that our employees are experiencing, this friction between employers and employees about return to work. You know, employees delivered incredible results in productivity during the pandemic. Now employers are saying, by the way, back to the office.
Right.
So there's an ongoing friction and tension. And this crisis of leaders causes a crisis for leaders. It makes it harder for good leaders to lead well in that context that's created. And while my book doesn't have any answers to how we change the world, it maybe has some answers for individual leaders. And it always goes back to deep self-knowledge, articulation of values, and behaving according to their values. Because leaders who behave in that way build followers. They build teams who'll go to the ends of the earth for them. They, their teams don't burn out. Their teams are prepared to put in the extra work. They'll come into the office 2 days a week if they have to, if they're following a leader that they truly believe in.
People just said that. So I conducted focus groups last week over the inclusion survey results. And I asked specifically, I said, what the employees said to me was the best people leaders don't often seem to be as valued by upper management. It's almost like the people that are great people leaders are not as valued. And then I asked them, what do you all think about people leaders? Do they hold you accountable? They said, absolutely, they hold us accountable, and we will go anywhere, go through a brick wall for them. So I think that you're right there. You're right on target there. But I want to ask you again to go back to the premise that you started with when you said to Tommy and I, you said, I think there's something in this book, especially for marginalized groups. If you want to sort of hit upon that again, what are some of the lessons that they can take away from your book that would help them be more effective at getting into leadership roles and being better leaders themselves?
Yeah, and thank you for asking that. And that was very much the genesis for me for the book, is I have this set of tools around reputation management. How can leaders from underrepresented minorities or of diverse identities use those? And it's about owning your voice, not being shy to tell your stories and your narratives, finding the right places to tell them. We talk about representation a lot, and representation is, of course, important, because if you don't see it, you can't dream it. But what if the leaders from underrepresented minorities that we see own their reputation so actively, other people see how to do that and learn about the building blocks? So what I'm saying is, by actively owning their reputation, talking about their stories, showing up in public forums, including LinkedIn, what leaders are doing is building a bridge for others to see it's possible, but also for the typical leadership norm to also see that it's possible, that it's not, you don't just need one person from an underrepresented minority in the team, that you can and will have many. So the reputation is like a power tool. And I feel that, and I did it myself. I think that people don't make the most of it, don't use it enough. That power tool of telling your stories, owning your voice, sharing your narrative, being humble, being vulnerable, showing where you made mistakes along the way. All of those, it's like a MBA class for those who are following you.
Right. Yes. Let me ask you a follow-up question, because it sounds to me, Charlotte, like you're saying to people that in part you have to play the long game. Yes. In other words, don't be so caught up with managing how people look at you who are in your current environment today. You're saying to some extent that this may or may not help you where you are, but it's going to help you. And that your book is really not for the present madness that we're in. Your book is for anybody when you say we need new leaders, you're looking past where we are today. Yes. And you're saying to some extent that the organizations that are going to be the most successful and the people that are going to be the most successful are doing these things around authentic reputation and all of that. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, that's a brilliant way of putting it. It really is about the long game, because your reputation is portable. It's not about the organization you're in. It's about the next one, and then the next one, and then the business that you start yourself when you've decided you've had enough of corporate. So you take your reputation with you as you go. So very much so, it's about the long game.
And this is why I think that this book and your perspective is so important. That so often marginalized people are so caught up in how people are judging them today, how they are stereotyping them today, that they're so busy trying to assimilate for the broken people that are around them. They don't realize that their talent and ability has something greater to offer to the world, and you're not limited to this current place that you're in. So I think that's powerful. I mean, it's a new thought, actually. It's a new thought, because people would like to give you a lecture. You don't know who I am. You don't know what it's like to be me. You're saying actually being the best version of yourself prepares you to be successful in life in general.
Yeah. And tell those stories. I mean, those stories, that you don't know what it's like to be me. Tell those stories. I'm a new LinkedIn connection of mine is a Zimbabwean woman who's lived in the US for a long time called Evelyn Bako. And she wrote a beautiful post today or yesterday. I read it about being the only person of color in her friend group at university. And now that she reflects back as a grown adult, how much that hurt her and how she's trying to making sure that her community now has more people of color in it, because she was always struggling. Now, how powerful is that a story to tell for a young person to read who's at a college in the US and realizes they're the only person of color in their friend group? And what a beautiful bridge she's building for others to follow her along, to learn how to reach out and build a community where she feels safe and supported. So those vulnerable stories have so much value, even though they hurt to tell. And, it hurt, I cried at the beginning of this podcast. I'm not saying I'm brilliant at being vulnerable, but I'm teaching myself to accept that there's no shame in it.
There's no shame, Charlotte. There is no shame. That is the humanity, right? No shame. In fact, some may say when you speak from the heart, you reach the heart. And so we particularly as adults, I think we can get very sophisticated in kind of lying or putting on a good face, right? Hey, this is what my reputation is. Yeah. And that's what I say, my narrative. But to your point, it also has to be our behavior, yes. Right? It also has to be how people are receiving us. And is our narrative and message and our behavior matching up?
Yes.
Right? I believe that it's more simple to have consistency of that management when it's value-based and it's true.
Yes.
There's no half-truths or lies in that. So I show up the way I show up because I am who I am. I'm working on myself. I'm letting you know I'm working on myself. You're seeing by way of behavior that I'm working on myself. And even as a leader in an event that is company-wide, division-wide, or worldwide, if I stand before you and I may admit, this is new for me, I believe that raises the level of humanity and vulnerability, because the people listening are saying it's new for all of us. Yeah, it's new for all of us. On the other side, I have problems with leaders who present themselves as knowing or experiencing everything.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm the master of all. I'm the only one in the world that knows this. I really have problems because I've been blessed to travel the world and see that there's a lot of people out there, right? And there's a lot of folks who don't even care about you on the other side of the world because they care about their proximity. And you're the only one in the world that has the answer. Come on. But I've been around leaders. Above all, just me. Come to me. And then when it doesn't go well, it's everyone else.
Yeah,
it's everyone else. And so as I, like Eric, one, definitely going to get your book. Definitely will recommend your book to our community, right, our clients, etc. In my closing words for today, a short time, boy, this time went by very, very fast.
Absolutely.
Charlotte, I just want to say thank you.
And
I want to say thank you for showing up as your authentic self.
Absolutely.
And not only from your professional career experience, but we didn't get there much, but your personal evolution, right? Mm-hmm. South African, moving to Germany, and not just but at your age and season, I'm certain you've experienced enough to get you to now. I would be interested in having you back to talk about what's on stage for you tomorrow. Charlotte, thank you for joining us.
Right.
Eric?
And so here's what I want to reiterate, and then I'm going to have you, if there's any message that you want to make sure that our community gets that you didn't give a chance to get out, I want to make sure that you have the final word on that. But I had a Congressman, Greg Landsman, on a few weeks ago, and I asked him, and I put up a post that said, please lie to me. and tell me that there's still an interest in bipartisanship. And he said, actually, Eric, there is. He says there's a lot. And so I'm going to tie that to you in this way. You said to us, there are a lot of introverts down here that are thinking through things. But I also think that you've said to us that reputation is about, there's a world of people out here that can be moved by a strong, positive, people-centered reputation. And so you're saying, don't be discouraged by what you see out here, because there is an audience for the authentic, real, genuine you. And I think that that's powerful. And so I want to let you have the last word on what's your closing message to our community around your book and some of the principles that are in there.
Well, thank you so much for this opportunity. And Tommy, I'd love to come back to talk about the future. Because this is about community, I actually want to talk about very quickly 2 other books that I lent on very much while reading We Need New Leaders. The one is Let Them See You by Porter Braswell. Porter Braswell is a US writer. I also interviewed him for the book. He's a leader. He's founded several businesses based on inclusivity. Absolutely wonderful book. And this is a manual for folks who, it's the guide for leveraging your diversity of work. Absolutely brilliant. And then the other book I want to say that I lent on is Building a Culture of Inclusivity by Priya Bates, who's in Canada, and Advita Patel, who's in the UK. This is how leaders can really actively build inclusive cultures in corporations. And, that's my message, is we all lean on others. We don't stand alone.
Well, Charlotte, we appreciate you joining us on this drive-by. I mean, just blew by this hour like nothing. And so we absolutely want to have you back. You're thoughtful, but your heart and your mind are gifts. And we are grateful that you chose to join us this Saturday morning, August the 2nd, to share your gifts with our community. Tommy?
Again, thank you, Charlotte Otter, author, speaker, advisor, exceptional human being. We want to thank you all again for joining us on this beautiful Saturday morning, afternoon, and evening for others. And join us next week for another episode of Diversity Conversations. Take care.
Take care.